Are we ready to begin?
Yes, we are ready to begin.
Okay,
We
I'm
are
sorry.
live.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I am Stephanie Simone Mahaney, and this is a joint committee meeting with the Youth Services Education and Libraries Committee, of which I am chair, and then the Zoning and Land Use Committee with Chair Doris Cruz. Tonight, we have two representatives from the DOE with us, and I would like to do a quick recap of the meeting for which this is part two. We met on May 4th at a public hearing during which the School Construction Authority gave a presentation on a proposed new site for a new 676 high school facility, 676 seat high school facility, which includes District 75 special education seats. The location is at 441 to 447 and 425 to 439 Ovington Avenue. Josephine has prepared a small slide presentation for us. And if you are ready, Josephine, we can.
Yes, I am. I just want to mention to some of the attendees who are on, this is a webinar format. Some may not be familiar with that. As part of the process.
Good evening.
Oh. Good evening. Could you say
Nick Massett.
Oh, hi, Nick.
Massett.
Hi, Nick. Welcome.
I'll mute myself again if you want me to.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great. There will be a portion of the meeting that questions can be asked by members of the public, and it's at that point that I can enable attendees to speak. So I'm going to proceed with sharing our screen here. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. My apologies. Okay. So the School Construction Authority attended the first meeting that Community Board 10 joint committees held to review the new proposed site at the former St. Nicholas Home, 441, 447, 425-439 Ovington Avenue. So the first few slides were presented at that meeting. I know there are several board members who were not in attendance, so we'll just do a really quick recap of the SCA's presentation. They provided their mission and vision, the public process for site selection, the proposed high school, the notice of filing, the analysis for alternate sites, the projected student population, location of proposed school site, a map, and the comment submission information. So the SCA just pretty much reviewed their mission statement to design and construct safe and attractive, environmentally sound public schools for children throughout the communities of New York City, and explained they're dedicated to building and modernizing schools in a responsible, cost-effective manner while achieving the highest standards of excellence in safety, quality, and integrity. They went over the public process for the site selection, explained they're required to present new sites to the local community board and the Community Education Council. In this case, there's going to be a presentation before the high school. It's a citywide council on high schools, different than the local CEC. There is a 45-day comment period, which commenced on April 19th. That closes on June 6th. So all comments have to be submitted to the School Construction Authority by June 6th, which is why we are going to be voting at the May 15th meeting, because our June meeting is after the deadline comment period. So the focus of the first portion of this meeting on May 4th was the site itself and not specifics about the school facility. So the proposed site is approximately 35,470 square feet, 0.81 acres, again, located on Ovington Avenue. The SCA is proposing to build a new high school facility of approximately 676 seats, including District 75. And here's a copy of the notice of filing. They also provided a list of alternate sites: 6700 3rd Avenue, a 19,713 square foot site at the intersection of 3rd and Senator Street, 7509 and 7503 Shore Road, and 362 Ovington Avenue. The 362 Ovington Avenue is to the rear of the ISPS 30, which is across the street. They provided projected student population numbers, as you can see here, beginning with the 22-23 projected student population 9th through 12th grade as 78,946. And Steve at the meeting did say that, you know, while the numbers are declining in these projections, they're projected to be lower, that the need in District 20 is greater. So, oh my goodness, I don't know why it's upside down. But here is a copy. I didn't notice that on the slide when he presented it. So here's a copy of a photo of the site, which is the old St. Nicholas home, the building adjacent to it. And actually there's one more building. I didn't realize that till just now. That is the old stables, which is included in the proposed acquisition. Oh, now this one's upside down. Okay. So this is a map of the proposed sites. You can see the shaded area on the map that was provided. And again, as mentioned earlier, the comment period ends on June 6th. And here is information on where comments can be mailed and also emailed to sites@nycsca.org. So that concluded the SCA's presentation, which was followed by lots of questions from committee members in attendance, as well as comments and questions from members of the public. Stephanie and Doris, our chairs of the committees, asked me to put together a few slides for board members to begin the conversation about what the statutory role is for community boards during the site selection process. And Section 1731 of the School Construction Authority Act provides this in detail. And I've highlighted some of the pertinent areas that pertain to community boards, and I've highlighted them here. So a public hearing was held on Thursday, May 4th. And as indicated here, each affected community board on aspects of the site plan which relate to the general public use of the educational facility and its impact on the surrounding community. The affected board may request the attendance of representatives of the authority or the city board at the hearing, and the authority or the city board shall comply with such requests. So such plan shall include, in the case of any project for which the acquisition of real property or interest therein is proposed, the recommended site and alternate sites considered, and any rationale as to why the alternate sites were not selected. It goes on to say that each affected community school board or community board shall prepare and submit to the authority written comments on the site plan. And after due consideration of such comments, the authority may affirm, modify, or withdraw the plan. So the full section was emailed to board members in advance. I just highlighted some of the sections as we're required to prepare comments in response to this notice of filing. There were lots of questions about the SCA's site selection criteria, and we were referred to the SCA's website. So what I did was I cut and paste because there were so many questions as to what the SCA looks for. So on their website, the SCA explains their general site requirements and preferences. So they look for at least 20,000 square feet of land, property for new schools, larger sites that allow for adequate space for at-grade play are strongly preferred. At least 2 street frontages, however, additional street frontages are preferred. The SCA considers approximately 100,000 square foot condominium units with available outdoor play space contiguous to the school space and mixed-use developments. The SCA requires column-free classrooms The SCA requires double heighted ceilings and column-free space in the gymnatorium, and all classrooms require natural light and ventilation. Okay. In February of 2023, the SCA amended its 5-year capital plan. And on this plan, we did note, if you could see on the bottom, it identifies the total need for Brooklyn High School seats at 192. And District 75 seats here at the bottom, special education, 1,104 seats. So at our meeting, we heard lots of community concerns, and I'll just briefly review them. Stephanie, is that okay? We'll just go through
Yes,
some of the
please.
concerns.
Yes.
Okay. The first was the oversaturation of schools in close proximity to the proposed site. So you could see a map there with a cluster of schools near the Ovington Avenue site. ISPS 30, which is located at 7002 4th Avenue and has 968 students, K-8. The ISPS 30 annex at 415 Ovington Avenue has 295 students. That's included within that 968 number. That's why it's in parentheses. The Lutheran Elementary School has 142 students. The High School of Telecommunications and Technology at 350 67th Street has 1,273 high school students. K-5, the new K-5 school that is proposed, that's actually construction's already begun at 6740 3rd Avenue, has 330 seats.
Wow.
PS 170, which is just, a few blocks away, has 912 students. It's K-5. Bay Ridge Prep's Upper School, 7420 4th Avenue, has approximately 100 students, and PS 102 at 211 72nd Street has close to 1,300 students. We also heard about traffic, transportation, and safety concerns. The street width is 30 feet. It's a narrow street. There are already 2 crossing guards assigned to the intersection of Ovington Avenue at 4th Avenue. The traffic on Ovington Avenue and 4th Avenue is chaotic at dismissal with U-turns. One neighbor spoke about damage to parked cars that take place, often. Ovington Avenue is highly congested and overcrowded, an overcrowded street. Many described it as a disaster with respect to traffic, parents during student pickup and drop off. There will be no parking for additional staff. Emergency vehicles sometimes have difficulty traveling down Ovington Avenue. And we heard that the high schools, High School of Telecommunications and this proposed high school would use the same train station at Bay Ridge Avenue, which has a very narrow platform and is already congested. So traffic, transportation, and safety, again, 2 crossing guards. Many of the parents spoke to members of the committee afterward and shared that we should really take a look and see what happens on an average day of dismissal. Both Dorothy and I did go out to the intersection, and there are 2 school crossing guards. And I would say that I would describe the intersection as during dismissal. I was there today as extremely busy. I would use the word extremely busy with lots of bad driver behavior. And those 2 school crossing guards, were working very difficult, they have a difficult job. They were working very hard, and they were both on one side of the street, and I can easily see adding a third because of the amount of traffic at this intersection. As well as the adjoining intersections, but this is the main one because it's all the schools, and it seems to be heavily converged here at Ovington and 4th. Next, we heard about enrollment and utilization. There was some frustration that there was no explanation as to how the seats will be utilized. Many high schools in New York City are underutilized, and analysis should be conducted to determine why and if these schools can be utilized to alleviate overcrowding in other high schools. Can smaller sites be used to remove younger children from Ovington Avenue so that the high school can work at the proposed site? Concerns that resources are being dedicated to the building of a new high school rather than upgrading the K-2 site, which is currently leased. The PSIS 30 annex is an old building and not designed as a school. It does not have a library, proper schoolyard, or gym. Its cafeteria is small. We received letters from students at the K-2 seeking help from the board, really sharing that they would like a new school facility because they have so many needs in their current facility, which is being leased. We heard about student behavior and interaction safety concerns. High school students are adults, and the city should consider associated issues. Potential rivalry between students of different high schools that are in close proximity, bullying, fights, challenges with sharing of space and transportation, concerns about the exposure of elementary and middle school students to high school students. Younger students will be exposed to negative behavior, smoking, language, relationships, altercations, and fights. General process concerns. Stephanie, do you want me to go through this? Or do you want us,
We can, I think we can move on. Do you think, I mean, there's so many.
there are so many.
Right, and I do have some of the responses from the School Construction Authority to the initial questions that, and then, of course, the outstanding questions that we still have. As Josephine had mentioned, the meeting on May 4th was primarily about the site itself, but it's very difficult to provide commentary and feedback if we don't have details about the use of the school and address all of the concerns that the public raised and that our two committees raised. Let me just, okay. So Steve Gonzalez responded with some answers. One of the initial questions was, why is the school being built when there's a decrease in population? There is a projected decrease of about 15,000 less high school students by 2027, but apparently Community Board 10 will not see that any impact from that decrease. Steve Gonzalez says this future high school is a class size reduction project intended to alleviate the overcrowding at nearby high schools, including telecommunications and Fort Hamilton High School, among others, is what he says. The problem, we were not given any information as to how this is a viable plan to alleviate that overcrowding, whether or not these seats would be restricted for zoned students or any other information. What was the criteria for selecting this site? Simply, it meets our minimum requirements as published on our website. If you recall from the slide, one of the criteria is 2 frontages. This school has only 1 frontage. I think it was suggested that that criterion could be waived, but we really don't have a firm answer for that. Why?
Stephanie, I just want to cut you off. Steve did provide an answer to the 1 frontage question.
Oh, okay, please.
He said, while we strongly prefer sites with 2 street frontages, it is not a mandatory requirement if the site is otherwise suitable, as this site is.
Okay, well, we have an answer. Thank you. And why were another sites selected? And this is the only site that the SCA could find that was large enough to accommodate a high school program. How long was the site selection process? And the notice of filing was published on April 19th, and public comment will conclude on June 6th, although I believe it was stated that they've been looking for years for a site.
Yes, so I followed up with Steve and said that the question really was pertaining to the site selection process. And his response was that they had been pursuing the site for a number of years. Actually, a few months ago, the SCA had reported to the community board that they were looking at this site for a K-5 school. So he does say that the school has been pursuing this site for a number of years. It was determined earlier this year in collaboration with the DOE that it was suitable as a high school due to its size. It is correct that we do not have seat need for new capacity for Brooklyn high schools. This project is planned to be funded through our class size reduction program to alleviate overcrowding at several area high schools.
Thank you. But we don't have an answer as to whether or not this would be an annex or the mechanism by which they would reduce the number of seats
No,
at the other high schools. And area high schools, I'm assuming are the only ones that are in District 20, which are telecommunications and Fort Hamilton High School.
yes.
Accurate, okay. And why are we adding another school to an already concentrated school area? The SCA has pursued this large site in order to provide additional high school seats to the community to alleviate the overcrowding at nearby high schools. That is the crux of the issue. And we asked, what is the percentage of seats that DOE is providing for zoned and commuter students? And we were told that the DOE would have to address this question. So I would like to welcome from the Department of Education, both John Banks and, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Shahrukh Tasneem.
Yes. Hi.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. We have so many questions. We would appreciate if you could perhaps provide the answers. At the first one is, how will these seats be utilized? Will they be restricted for zone students? How will you ensure that the reduction in overcrowding at the two high schools in District 20?
So, as SC has shared, this new building, it is supposed to open in 27-28 school years. That is like 5 years from now. And right now we are like at the very beginning of the process. So when we think about the question you are asking, these are all very valid questions, but we start thinking about this and we reach out to the community and move forward with a collaborative conversation with the community as we do the school design part. And that typically happens a couple of years before the school building, a couple of years of the planning school opening. So at this stage, we do not have that's not we are looking at right now, because this is so farther in future. But when we are at that stage, we do work with the community members to come up with a collaborative plan to make the best use of a new building.
So is there any plan? Are you able to say whether or not there's a plan to open this citywide, or is it going to be restricted?
Not at this stage, because this is we are not at that stage to look into it, because what we understand from the information we got from SCA that this building has not been constructed. This is not constructed yet. So all those questions you are asking, those are very valid questions, but we are not at the stage to think about that right now.
Okay, the answers are critical to our understanding of how well this will work in the community. So
you have a few
yes.
members that have questions.
I was going to say I have many questions, but I'd like to begin with our committee members. So I believe Terry is first.
Terry, you're still muted.
Mute. I'm good.
Yes, you're good. Sorry.
So a few questions. Something we're not clear on is how many of the students who currently attend high school in Bay Ridge commute from other neighborhoods. I think that's important to understand. I'd also like to understand why the DOE allows Fort Hamilton High School to be so grossly overpopulated as to cause some pretty serious situations. I don't understand why there isn't a cap. And if there isn't, how do you ensure that the kids who would overpopulate those schools would go to the new school? Because you don't seem to have an answer to that either. So if 40% of the kids who are going to our local schools don't live in the neighborhood, and Fort Hamilton is overpopulated by a very significant percent, simply not allowing so many kids to attend the school, given that you have seats elsewhere in the city, just does not make sense to me. And I'm not against building the high school, and we definitely need services for D75. So I understand that as well. I just don't get that this makes sense in the broader scheme. So that's my question. Those are my questions.
We can, like, we hear you. And like, we know that, certain part of the district has over, like, there is a lack of seats, but then the other part of Brooklyn, they might have access seat. So I will defer to John to respond to the Fort Hamilton question, and I can definitely look into the part of question you have about Bay Ridge, and I can get back to you. I will also share my email address in the chat. So any specific question you have regarding any schools and data regarding those schools, we are happy to get back to you with the data. I'm going to share my email address here in the chat.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Banks. I'm the, my apologies. I'm the executive director for Brooklyn South High Schools. I do want to be clear, though, that there are several different superintendencies that operate within District 20. So my specific superintendency, we oversee FDR High School and New Utrecht High School, while the New Visions superintendency oversees telecommunications and Fort Hamilton. I think when it comes to enrollment questions or enrollment processes, as far as how seats are determined, seat availability, and what those sessions look like, we would have to bring in members of enrollment to speak further about that. But I do want to reiterate, I think what's already been shared, which is that this is an ongoing process, and we are really at step 1 of this process. And getting community input regarding how this process plays out over several years. I think, as Sharuk said, this is really something that's aimed at 2027, 2028. So we have several years of planning for this process, that soliciting community input, understanding community need is really a central part of this process. And I can't speak to all of the intricacies involving Fort Hamilton or telecommunications, unfortunately, just because my superintendency oversees different schools in District 20. But I do know it is a complicated formula, complicated algorithm that goes into how we match students to seats, and starts really with parent choice, student choice, and ensuring that we are making decisions that comport with that to the extent that we can. So.
Okay,
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I think that gentleman's name was John, if I recall, correct?
yes.
Yeah, John, I have a question for you. I'm a little bit confused here. There's something that sometimes they say local and they say at large. Okay, that means like when you say local, you say it's restricted to people within a certain community. And this appears to be what they're looking at is like an at-large type of a thing. People could come in from just about anywhere. And so I personally don't see how that relieves or is intended to relieve the Fort Hamilton telecommunications thing. I'm also, you say this is an ongoing process, but I don't understand how often when you're planning a school in this kind of a situation, do you get to this stage in the process and then abandon it? All right. In other words, if you have a lot of negative feedback from the community, how often does it happen that the school construction authority or whoever is the final word here turns around and says, you know what, they're right, and we're going to abandon this? I mean, do you really listen, okay, to what's being said? Or, and I know you'll say yes, but I'm saying to you, I'd like to know statistically how often it happens that you just abandon the plan because you agree with the community.
So I'd say on the enrollment question, your first question, there have been no determinations to my knowledge regarding how enrollment will work with this proposed new school, because we are very, very early in the process. And so I can't really speak to that because I don't think they have actually gotten to a point where they've decided on how the enrollment process will work for this school specifically. I think when you're asking about how much input and the back and forth, I can't give you a percentage. I don't know from SCA's history of school openings or closings, but I can say that this school particularly is a product of community input from the CEC, from the CCHS, from the council member that represents the area. And that there's been a lot of community input regarding the need for an additional high school or the want for additional seats. And so I do know they are listening. Now, as far as what that actually looks at percentage wise, I can't give you a number.
It's not really my question. My question is, if you have negative feedback as you're getting here, I think to a certain degree, how often, I mean, you must have some statistic on it. You're looking at this all the time. You go through this process and it's a very definite process. Okay. So how often do you get to this stage where we are right now, where you've been talking to people and they say, and you say, well, you know what, I can see why this would be a real problematic area. And I mean, how often does it happen that you abandon your plans at this stage? This is part of a process, correct? Correct?
Right. And
Okay, so I just stop there. So it's part of a process. So you've gotten to this stage of the process. How often does it happen that you abandon it at this stage of the process if the hearing from the community? I mean, I just want an answer to that question if you can give it.
And I will once again say that my position is to, as executive director of Brooklyn South High Schools, which is supporting school support and operations for New Utrecht and FDR High School, among others throughout Brooklyn South. I don't work for our central enrollment team. I don't work for central SCA or for district planning. I'd have to, return things over to Sharuk as far as that goes, because I can't answer your questions, Steve, on that regard. I can say that, we do value community input. And so I can't give you a hard number, but I do want to make sure that as this process is ongoing, that we hear from the community, that we are collaborators within the community. I'd have to defer to SCA, to district planning, in any regard to sort of hard numbers as far as your question goes. And I understand your question.
Yeah, and because the issue that I have here is that there's a point at which, there's people that live in the community, right? This thing just keeps coming back to life, it just seems to. And I have great sympathy for the people who live in that very near community that are around it. They're living on a razor's edge. They have no clue if this is going to happen. There has to come to a period where you say, we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. And I recognize that there's a process that you have to go through, but there doesn't seem to be a process that you go through, because in the past we've heard, oh no, they're not going to do it. And then the thing comes back to life. And these poor people that live in those districts or close to the district, how do they plan their lives? Because they might say to themselves, my God, I don't want to live across from this. I've got to get rid of my house. Or oh, good, I'll stick with it. I mean, whatever. They have a right to that type of information. And, I would urge you at some point to come to a decision on this particular property. It doesn't mean that I agree with you. We need the schools, but the people need some finality when it comes to a proposal so that they know how their lives are going to progress. And I think that's what, it may be something that's kind of hidden that people don't talk about. They don't want to say it because nobody wants to say no to a school, but and certainly I don't. But I got to tell you, if I lived across the street from this building that was there for so many years, I knew what I had, and then the what was the hospital, the home closes, and you say, okay, what's going to happen? So I'm just asking you to please let us know as soon as possible what's going to happen there, so that those people can get on with their lives.
Thank you, Steve. I would just like to add that although there is a recognized need for seats in District 20, a lot of the feedback during the public hearing was yes, seats, but not at this site. And that also came from the CEC. Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, my question is two-part. First part concerning Brooklyn, and then the second part to the same question is citywide. And the question is this: how many high schools are there where the enrollment is limited to a very specific geographic area and it's not open citywide?
So Dean, I'd have to get back to you on that. You know, once again, I can only speak to the high schools that we serve, and we are only a portion of Brooklyn South high schools. That includes, you know, once again, FDR, New Utrecht, but we don't oversee Fort Hamilton, telecommunications. And so I'd
So
have to,
any of the schools that you oversee, are they limited to a specific area?
so there are different zoning regulations that exist and different open and otherwise, but I'd have to get back to you on that. And, you know, and I do apologize because I think, you know, all of the questions that are coming up have quite a lot of merit. And I think there are some additional folks that really should be involved in this conversation that can answer those questions for you all as well. And I will say, over the course of this this process, and Sharu can talk a little bit more about the actual regulatory
Yes.
part of the process. From a district planning perspective, there are components that go into all of that kind of detail.
In general, high schools are unzoned. But if you are looking for like, you know, specific information about like, you know, high school all over the city or just for District 20, like, you know, what, like there are 4 high schools in District 20, and none of them, like, you know, are zoned. But I can definitely send you the information about like high schools around the city, if that is helpful. And what data point are you looking for? Like, you know, are you just asking if there are any high school in Brooklyn that is zoned, so that I just understand, like, you know, how can we help you with
Yeah,
with
the
your
reason
data
I'm
request?
asking this is
Mhm.
because if there are no high schools that are zoned for a very small area like we're looking for, I don't know what the likelihood is that in the future we would be zoned that way. That's the gist of the question.
Like as far as I understand, like, you know, there are like very few high schools that are zoned. Like, you know, these high schools are mostly unzoned. And I also want to address one of the questions that was asked about, like, you know, letting the community know when there is a new school opening, so that the people who live nearby and the parents and the community are aware that it's what is coming up. So, like, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, like, you know, that school opening is a long process from getting like the land acquired and then, like, you know, getting the buildings like, you know, constructed. And once there is a building and it's ready to open, then we go into the process of working with the community to see, like, you know, how we can best use the new capacity to like, you know, help the community like, you know, that are in the area and in the district, and also, like, you know, all the kids who needs a good high school and a seat, a school seat for them. So like, you know, for example, right now there's 4 new schools that will be opening in District 20 in September 2024. So right now, these schools, we know that they are opening in September 2024. So that now we are in the process of, like, you know, talking to the community, talking to the CC, talking to the school leadership team as we are planning for those new capacities, and, like, you know, thinking about how to make sure that this school meets the elementary school and middle school seat deficit in the community and in the district. So, like, you know, this is a process. So, like, you know, we never like, you know, think about, never think about, like, you know, the school opening as a separate process. Like, you know, as John also shared, it's a collaborative process. And for this particular project, since it's so far away in our future, we are not there right now. But for these 4 other new buildings that I mentioned, they're opening in September. So we are in the process of community engagement as we decide and open these buildings for September 2024.
Thank you. Doris?
Yes, thank you. You told us about the grades 9 to 12 projections with a projected decrease in high school population of 15,000 students. And you said it's different for a school district 20. Why didn't you bring us those numbers? I think that's a very important question for us.
I'm sorry, I don't think you got the number from us. Can you give me a little background, which data that you are mentioning?
Josephine showed a
Yeah.
slide that showed that the decrease, the projected decrease in high school student need for high school seats
Yes.
over the next, I forget how many years.
So I think that data came from SCA. So
SCA.
I would defer your question to them.
Well, they didn't have an answer either.
And they
It's-
deferred to DOE.
Yes.
Because they said that the conditions for South Brooklyn are for our area are different, but no one has given us those numbers. So I think it would be very important to get us those numbers.
Okay.
And then second, as of, I think it was November of 2022, you said we needed 192 seats, high school seats, which is absurd. Fort Hamilton High School has 3 sessions. And that's approximately 1,200 students per session. This school will not reduce the overcrowding at Fort Hamilton High School. And I think you have to look at things in more broadly and look at the need to address the overcrowding at that school. And we were told that members of the community have made suggestions to school construction for alternate sites, and they did not get any feedback from the SCA.
I think specifically, Doris, the one site that was mentioned most recently by this board was during the site selection of the Santander Bank site. That's
Yes, it
85th
does.
Street and Fifth Avenue. Pretty comparable in size to this, it's about 32,000 square feet. And the SCA mentioned at that meeting that high schools were not an identified need, high school seats at that time. And that since, has changed. But the CEC, who representatives in attendance at our meeting mentioned that they submitted a number of sites and felt that this location was not a good one for high school seats in particular.
So why did, again, we have an extremely overcrowded high school that this will not effectively address, but why did there were no need for high school change for, here's a new high school, guys? Why did that determination?
Well, I think, I'm sorry, I just want to say something. I think
That's okay.
ultimately, what I'm hearing here is a constant litany of no one could actually say why they chose this site. No one could tell us if there is an increase in a need for seats, or if there was let's call it what it is. If there's overcrowding to begin with, give us the numbers. All we're asking for as a community is transparency. If you're coming here to sell this, you're doing a piss poor job. And I say the SCA did it, and now the BOE is doing it. Maybe it's the choice of how you choose to sell it to a community. But right now I'm not hearing it, because all this information, which is integral to people digesting and processing this need for a school and the need for a school on this site, is not being presented. We're being hit with a bunch of different criteria, but no one's tying it together. And yeah, we need a little bow on top. We do. We want it tied together. We're the community. You're going to drop it in our laps, do it the right way. And that's my big criticism. Now, other than that, I was born on that site. I have no problem with you putting a school there. If that's intended, if that's where it belongs, and there's a need for it and it's a provable need, prove it. Let's see the POC here. Let's see the proof of concept. Why you need this school at this time in this spot. Everybody
And then-
else asks for proof of concepts for everything.
Then I would like to follow up on the transparency, because the School Construction Authority, the SCA, showed us 3 sites that they rejected as part of their process. One is owned by Bay Ridge Prep and has been for quite a long time. They have development plans. And one site is less than half of your required need for a high school. So those 2 sites should not have even been on the list. And I do believe that the SCA and the Board of Ed should consider the impact that that 646 or 76 more seats will have on overcrowding at the Bay Ridge Avenue subway station. And now I'll be quiet.
Right.
All of this is very valid questions. And it's all things that if I were presenting, I'd want to have in my pocket to show the people I'm presenting to. I know developers do this. They have to show it all and they're going to get, their questions asked. We just want to know why. And again, I'll be honest, I'm all for new high schools. Yes, Fort Hamilton's too crowded. Yes, will 600 seats take some overcrowding off Fort Hamilton? Of course it will. But tell us why this is your solution. And that's it. And then we could make an intelligent decision or not as to whether or not we'd like to support it.
Okay, thank you, Camilo. Barbara Germack?
Well, I worked at Fort Hamilton at some point. Most of the youngsters who go to Fort Hamilton come by train, come by bus. If you're ever on the 86th Street subway stop around between 2 and 3, it's impossible. So exactly who is this appealing to? It's not for the neighborhood children. It's for other places. This doesn't make sense.
Thank you for I hear I hear what you are saying, and I do I do agree with you in a way that the community needs to know and they needs to be involved in the process. But the meeting today we came here for is about the site at the Ovington, and what I hear and what I understand from the information we have is this was the best possible site that was found to build a high school in this neighborhood, and there have been a lot of and this site was actually chosen by SCA, and the reason to build a high school is based on the response and feedback from the community. We have heard it from the CEC, we have heard it from the CSC, from the District 20 Superintendent's office, Superintendent David Preto's office, that the community has been advocating for a high school in this neighborhood for a really, really long time. Because as you have mentioned about Fort Hamilton and also the other high schools in the district, they are there is a real need for high school seat in the neighborhood. So this decision was made because of the community feedback. So now that these other issues that are being raised about how it's going to help alleviating the overcrowded situation at Fort Hamilton, why this site was chosen. I think we need I think many of these questions pertains to SCA, and but as far as we have heard from them, this site was chosen because this was the the best possible option given all the facts and figures they have to look at.
Thank you. Just to be clear, all of these questions were put before the SCA, and they continue to deflect and say to go to the DOE for answers.
Yeah, just to concur with you, we're asking why. We know you chose it. We know that they chose it because they feel it's the best site. We would like to know why. And yes, not in a wishy-washy way, but in a directly data-driven criteria.
Okay, thank you, Carmelo. Barbara, Paula? You're
Barbara,
on
you're
mute,
mute.
Barbara?
You just have to
You're still on
unmute. You can hit the space bar.
Okay, okay.
Good. Yeah.
All right, so I guess I'm a little taken aback by the process. It seems like we're building a school and we don't have a vision for how it's going to be used. And say that there is a tremendous amount of overcrowding that we want to address, then shouldn't all of the seats in that school be dedicated to taking students from Fort Hamilton? Why are we talking about bringing more students into the community when we can't adequately serve the students we already have?
Again, thanks for your feedback, but I have mentioned, like, you know, at the beginning that this school building, you know, this is not built yet. We are in the process, and all the questions you have are very important questions. And these are all part of the decision-making process. But as we move forward in the process, when it, like, you know, we will reach out to the community, and then we can come together with all these questions and look at the solution. But, like, you know, it's we right now we are not at that part of the process.
But once a school is built, it needs to be filled. So if you don't have a vision for a school before it is built, then it seems to me that the school gets built and the community could potentially have less impact on what happens because it's there. I don't understand why the vision isn't first and paramount before you build. You build with a sense of purpose and by identifying the problems and the needs of the students. You're just building a school and then you're gonna take kids whose parents want them to go to school here and kids who maybe have a sibling here and get it just doesn't make sense to me.
You
It
know,
also
one,
doesn't make sense that you're not looking at how additional students are going to impact the demographics here in terms of public transportation usage, in terms of many, many different things. You know, what's the impact to the community of an additional 672 odd students if you're not taking them all from a school that's already overcrowded? So then we're going to be overcrowded by even more students, or overpopulated by even more students in a district that can't accommodate them?
you know, one of the leading lines from A Field of Dreams, if everybody remembers.
Build it, they will come.
Build it, they will
And they
come.
will come. That's what's gonna happen to us. Build it,
It
and
just,
they will come.
That's
I
what
don't,
it sounds like.
And I'm
again,
not saying-
I
I'm not
understand.
saying that in a disparaging way for any high school student, but it does not address what we're looking to solve.
No, and I understand. I'm starting to get an idea of why. My impression is, and anyone from the SCA or the DOE could correct me if I'm wrong. It appears that site selection is the very earliest part of this. And then the decision as to how to populate the school happens later because there's so many years in between site selection and construction and opening that basically it's like trying to jump on a moving train.
Right.
Okay,
So
thank
you
you, Carmela.
right. So you're going to get on this moving train, and then eventually, as demographics change and things change, and I listen, and I understand as a New Yorker that sites are limited, so site selection should come first. But again, all we ask as a community, or at least I can, right, for myself, is transparency in the process. I completely doubt that New York City has a holistic approach to any of this. So talking to them about traffic, talking to them about not overcrowding, but traffic and quality of life is moot. here. But at least with regards to the school, let's have some transparency as to what's going on.
Yes,
If we're
I
going to
agree.
jump on a moving train, I want to make sure that someone's driving the train and why they're going in the direction they're going.
Okay, thank you, Carmela. We have so many other committee members with questions. Anne, please, go ahead.
Yes, building on what Carmela was just saying. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to hear more about how DOE and the mayor's office and city planning coordinate and prioritize the simultaneous and overwhelming need for school seats and also affordable housing against the reality of limited building sites in a low density area. Where's the coordination factor, John?
So I hear your question, Ann, and I hear several different things, and I wish I had all the answers to these. I mean, I hate to return to this a little bit, but we see overcrowding at all of our District 20 high schools. And it's not just a Fort Hamilton issue. I mean, District 20 in general has a lot of large high school. And I think you bring a very good point up that we need to reconsider these things. And I think, I'm happy to sit and hear all of the feedback that all of you have to provide. But I also would say, Josephine and Stephanie, we need to have other people at the table. SCA, enrollment, other folks who can answer these questions, because you bring up a lot of valid points. And this is a collaborative effort. I know, and I will say again, that my understanding from the limited conversations I've been in, and generally my office is responsible for school governance of already open schools, not opening new schools, but I think there has to be a collaborative conversation about these concerns. And in general, I think that the first step in this process has been a response to community things that have been raised. Once again, by the council member, CCHS, CEC. And I think we need to have all those folks be part of the conversation, along with representatives who are better positioned to answer specific questions regarding enrollment size, enrollment processes, and all of that, because this is a multi-step process, once again. And it is a complicated process, especially when we talk about zoning, location, how enrollment's going to work. These are all different facets of a long process that starts with zoning and location piece and then moves through those things. So I would just urge us to revisit this. I'm happy to continue to take these questions on and then revisit the conversation to make sure that each of them are answered with intentionality and purpose as we move forward. So.
Okay, thank you. Jane Marie?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, actually, I'm echoing something that John just said. A lot of the questions that have come up have really been around enrollment, and these are DOE policies for enrollment where parents have choice. It's not just about where your address is, although being in a school zone is often the first priority. When I went on, I just looked online as we were talking, and I tried to look up Fort Hamilton High School. I put the link in the chat. When you go to the admissions page, according to the admissions page of what's listed online, according to that, they do, in the past year, it said that guaranteed offers to students who live in the zoned area. There were about 500 applicants in this group and all received offers last year. Then priority group 2 was then to New York City residents. There were about 240 applicants in this group and less than 10 received offers last year. So that's the enrollment information, because I know that there's been a lot of questions around the enrollment at Fort Hamilton. So that was from the DOE website. And as I said, a lot of this is around enrollment policies, which are not determined locally, which we are all following the city. Regarding the new schools that are coming up in September 2024, it was mentioned again that there were 4 new schools. So I believe that 3 of them are elementary and 1 is a middle school, if I'm not mistaken. Now, with these schools, this has also been about a 3 to 5 year process, depending on the site that we're talking about. So this does take a number of years before the plans come to fruition. And because of all these new schools that are opening, this is why it's been such a topic of conversation at CEC meetings, which I also attend, the Community Education Council meetings, that parents want to know. We're having these beautiful new elementary schools and now in middle school, the first middle school coming aboard with this. Where did the children go after this? And so conversation has repeatedly been around getting new high school seats. And yes, that there is overcrowding at Fort Hamilton High School and parents are worried about it. The idea of annexes has come up in conversation in some of those meetings, but again, it's just the forum where ideas are shared, not necessarily where policies are made. So that has been a part of it. And of course, what always comes up, it was another question about what about the initial plans and then the actual intention of how a building is used. We have an example in the school that was built at 270 59th Street, which is MS 936 and PS 939. So those two, that was originally in the initial proposals, and when at that time Superintendent Constantino was here in District 20, when that was first proposed, it was proposed as a middle school. And then somehow it got changed to be a K-8 school. And then when it eventually actually was coming to open, it was 2 small schools with a shared space. So it is a middle school with 1 number and 1 principal, and an elementary school with another school number and principal and staff. So that's like another example of how things, how there was like a change in the usage, but it was, again, that the site went through. And again, what's come up again with CEC and with SCA is the challenge of the availability of real estate. And, I agree with you, a resident in the middle of a residential block did not seem to be the best location for a new high school. I do understand that they are challenged in finding space. And I think that the real big feedback was, can we look a little harder? Can we search a little wider? Since it is a situation where children can apply from anywhere within the city when they're making their high school applications, do we need to kind of look around the borough or the district, look a little further over? Because if you notice, a lot of the new schools that have been built are built on more of the industrial pocket, the corner by 65th Street area. They're not necessarily within Dyker Heights, for example. They're kind of on that edge closer to, below 3rd Avenue in that area. So thank you. Just some things to share.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, Diane?
Good evening. I don't think anyone disputes the need for a high school, but I'm reminded of years ago, many, many years ago, when Fort Hamilton had over 5,000 students that were enrolled there. And they built Sunset Park High School, which was supposed to initially alleviate the overcrowding at Fort Hamilton. Well, it did not. They ended up making it just a choice school, etc. So my question is, given given the idea that you want to put this school on Ovington Avenue, which I think is a horrible decision. I worked on that block, the traffic and on all the problems that were cited earlier do exist, and it's a very dangerous area to put 600 high school students. But say you build it, okay, and it's supposed to be, a choice school that parents can choose. Children that would have originally go to Fort Hamilton have the opportunity to go to this school. Well, what if the school is not filled? What if people don't choose this school? Then what happens? Are you going to rezone? And so, yes, enrollment needs to be a part of this discussion, and we need to know that now before we can go ahead and vote whether or not we approve for this proposal to go through. We can't be blinded. And I do understand, I've worked for the DOE for 30 years, so I understand the entire process, but it does not make sense for us to make a decision blindly. I, for one, I wouldn't want my child going to a school that doesn't have all the amenities that a Fort Hamilton has. And if this school is not filled by parent choice, are you going to rezone and require me to send my child to that school? So I think we need to really have, as John said, we need to have all the players. And I'm really disappointed that all the players were not actually here tonight to attend this meeting, including the individual from the superintendent's office that does oversee Fort Hamilton and Tully.
Yes.
I think that they should have been a part of this discussion tonight. But before we can make any kind of a decision, I do believe that we need to have all the players available so that we can have every single question answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for your question, and thank you for Jane for the background information that you provided. I really appreciate it, because that is a big part of the whole process. I really like, Jane, how you put out here, how the site selection happens and how this process is collaborative between so many agencies within DOE. And I do agree with you, Diane, that many of these questions you are asking, they are so important and they are a big part of the decision-making process. But the site selection here, this is from ACA. ACA decides, they look at all possible, sites, and they look for, if the CEC or the community wants them to look at a site, I think they also take into this consideration. I am not able to speak on their behalf that how this site was selected, but as far as I understand, based on all the data and facts they had, this seemed like the best possible option for this high school. And also, as you mentioned, when this school opens and if there is not enough students, that is that if that happens, if we open and school and with a specific design, and if it's not attracting student, then we'll work to ensure that there is admission priorities in place, or what other strategies that we can implement to best support the school and support the community. So those are part of the process as we move forward with opening the school.
Thank you.
Stephanie, there are two comments in the chat.
Right.
One is actually from our new board member, Elizabeth Edmonds. One of the issues we have with the current students at Fort Hamilton who may commute from outside of the neighborhood is that they commute by moped or motorcycle. Because they're typical teenagers and do not necessarily ride with an abundance of caution, it's not surprisingly quite dangerous for younger children who are crossing the streets and using the sidewalks when they encounter the motorcycles. So I would be quite concerned for the safety of younger children to open a new high school on the same block as two elementary schools. And then we just have a comment that they're sharing from Michael Mendito that there's a tremendous amount of residential development happening in the vicinity of this proposed school. Is this additional residential population density and its impact on the community being taken into account? And I think both questions, just to share with board members here tonight, that there are post the site selection process there, the SEA cannot close on a property as mentioned to us by SEA until it is until the application is submitted to the New York City Council following the site selection process, and there is a seeker, which is a state environmental quality review study. And I think questions pertaining to, which we could talk about during committee discussion, is that that's been raised by a number of residents by email, is the adding a high school to a block that has two elementary schools and a middle school across the street, and safety concerns. Stephanie, I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Josephine. Are there any other questions or comments? Terry? Yeah, wait, are you there? Okay,
Just on
go
you.
ahead.
So John raised the issue of how we need more parties at the table. How's that supposed to happen before June 5th, when comments are closed?
So,
I mean, I feel like you guys came with good intentions, but not adequately informed. Given the discussion that happened at our last meeting, some of the questions we would have tonight would be pretty obvious about school population, about whether it's for zone schools, about why there's so much overcrowding, if there's seats available elsewhere, how many kids are coming from outside District 20 to attend District 20 schools. I think you should have known some of that. I understand those may not be your areas, but there was time to gather information from the people who did know it if they couldn't be in attendance. So if you're not able to do it and we need them at the table, how do we get them to the table?
I do want to say, Terry, to that, there are several pieces of this as well that are issues that unfold over time, right? And so when we start to get into questions regarding how is the local precinct or DOT going to help manage transportation to and from the school? What does that enrollment process look like, right? These are questions that generally do come up along this process, but not necessarily are answered at the very incipient stage, because they each have different components. Many of them are regulatory in nature. When we get to the point where we're talking about 16-year-olds riding motorized scooters, mopeds, having been a former principal in Brooklyn South myself, I had kids that lived 2 blocks away that rode a moped to school because they wanted to show their friend their new ride, right? So I think we get into things that kind of drill down from a larger scale perspective into the day-to-day management of schools, traffic, neighborhoods, and all of that. And the closer we get to the school proximity, I think, as far as our office goes, that's really what we manage, right? How do we help support leadership? How do we support communities? When we're talking about the larger scale questions that many of you have around the decision-making process about siting, the construction process, the enrollment process, that's a stepped out piece. And all of these are valid, and I do appreciate you all bringing these to us and sharing them. I know Josephine sent me questions, today, right, Josephine? We had reached out to you, and I shared those, once I received them. But it is a process, and some of these are questions that there can be answers, I think, in the short term, and there are questions that will probably take up until the day of an opening of any school, and even maybe after the first or second or third year, just because of the way that process unfolds when we open any school. So I just kind of put that out there, and I do appreciate it. I would encourage you all to continue to share those questions, because it is a collaborative effort. And I mean that. And, you know, I think there are some that we can try to seek shorter term answers to, and some that will have a lot more to do with where we are in 4 years if the school opens, right? Because there's still a lot of pieces that need to be put in place for that to happen, that have a lot more to do with who the principal is, what traffic patterns look like on those, you know, in 2027 or 2029 or 2030. And so, you know, I do appreciate this, but I think we also have to look at this as a timeline of answers to many of these questions. So I would put that out there, and I would also just say to, you know, to continue to share those questions myself with Sharuk, so that we can make sure that they're getting to the right folks, and that we continue to have an open dialogue around the site and around the opening of any school that might happen in any district across Brooklyn South.
I guess what concerns me is a lot of these questions are not just our site specific. I don't really understand why they're not part of the overall process. To not know how many of the overflow students are coming from outside the district seems like a pretty critical question if you're trying to decide on a site. And to not know if this would be a zone school or not, if the goal is to alleviate the overpopulation at local schools, doesn't really make sense to me. If the goal is to alleviate the overpopulation, then it seems obvious that it must be a zone school, or you know that so many kids are coming from outside the district that you don't need to make it a zone school, but you're just inviting more kids in. I just don't, like, just from a project management point of view, I just don't feel like enough homework was done.
Thank you, Terry. Doris, again?
Yes, you keep saying they are decisions that will be made down the road. No, they are decisions, they're just, it is information that needs to be provided now to give the community a greater sense of what is going on and to have a greater coordination between the DOE and the SCA and the community. And it is part of the process, and we once this site is approved, we are out of the process. So to not be included in that part, to not have information, is not acceptable. Thank you.
I only have one more question.
Oh,
before
Carmelo, we
leave.
had some other.
Oh, you have
I'm
more
sorry, I know,
people?
yes, please.
It's okay.
And we'll come back to you, I promise.
It's okay, no problem.
Leoden, and then Lori.
Carmelo. So I just wanna make a couple of quick points. I want to echo a lot of the arguments and conversation that we're having here. We definitely this is the second meeting that we're having to discuss, you know, the site location, and a lot of the questions that I'm hearing today are the same questions that we pretty much, you know, the community and members of the board had for SCA, and I just personally think that they're not equipped to answer these questions that we're kind of bringing about. They're larger and questions that they seem to only be involved with site selection, and so the first point that I want to make is that if we have a deadline in June and we're not getting the people that can probably provide us with this information, maybe the board should really focus into what we know and what we have in front of us, which is the site itself, and provide a thorough kind of either recommendation or concerns that we have with a long list of things that we can probably focus on with this specific site, and table perhaps some of the information that we don't know about regarding, you know, population, school population or enrollment down that it seems to come from different departments or decisions that are kind of made down the line. I mean, looking at the site itself, we all have like a big list of concerns that I think we should probably address. And even if the authority goes on to push forward with this project, we should provide them with all the concerns that we have, because I mean, there's a lot of concerns pertaining to safety. There's a lot of concerns pertaining to traffic. There's a lot of concerns pertaining to, again, I think the point is that it's not an ideal site, and it's not an ideal location, and there's a lot of concerns. But if we provide them with the list of concerns that the community has, at least, even if the project will to move forward, it will be kind of a way to ensure that the concerns we have will be mediated through either, adding more additional crossing guards, more police in the area. I mean, you name it. Like, I think some of these things, maybe with technology or the right kind of attitude, could be mediated. So that kind of will be my recommendation as to, if we're not going to get the information that, that we're kind of looking for as to the site selection and population and all that, to maybe just focus on the site. Otherwise, I think we're going to go around in circles and not make any kind of, determinations of progress.
Thank you. Thank you, Leodan. What you said is something I also wanted to share with everyone here today. All the questions you are asking today, these are part of the process about the safety concern about the building. When we are at that stage, New York City Public School is we make sure to create a safe environment for our kids. So when the time comes, we make sure the departments within New York City Public School, they will assess the need of the building at the appropriate stage, and then they will work with assigning if there is extra school safety agents are needed, and if they need crossing guards, those will come when we get on that part of the process. So just to repeat what Mr. Castillo just shared, I think a very effective way to answer many of the questions you have is I have shared my email address here. Please send me all the questions you have. Share as much detailed question as you can. We will get back to you with the answers. If it's not within our department, we will connect with the other DOE offices who can give you the answer, and that way we can move forward with a more constructive way of understanding what is happening and to answer the questions you have. It was mentioned that there are many parts of DOE that work together when a new school buildings becomes a new school where our kids go and join the school and learn. So in this process, many of these questions you have, they pertain to, some of them don't, we can't answer them ourselves, because there might be a sister agency, a partner agency who we are more equipped to answer your questions. So please send me your questions, and then we will look into all of them and get back to you with with answers to the best of our capabilities.
Thank you. My concern is that this is a fait accompli, and even though the community is providing feedback, and you say that it's a collaborative process, our concerns, our questions will not be answered until the school construction is underway. Just wanted to add that. Lori?
Hi. So I do want to echo and definitely add on to what Leodan was saying is, I feel like, and for those of us who have been on the board for quite some time, this happens, all the time. We are asked for our feedback, and the way that the process is structured, and this problem certainly won't be solved today, but the way the process is structured is that, first the SEA goes out and looks and says, oh, here's a piece of property that meets our specifications, and this would be a good spot for a school. And we have this list, and it says we need this kind of school or that kind of school or that kind of school. it's always a changing landscape, but some of the things don't change, which is number one, that the ordering that in which you take these steps has never been good. This won't get revamped today, but the problem is, and as also Doris pointed out, the input you're looking for from us is this or is this not a good spot for a school? You're really talking about more of an environmental impact statement. Really, in essence, that's the kind of feedback that these presenters need. However, in the overall democratic process of it, we are told, well, you had a time to speak when it came before you. True, but it's difficult to speak to a situation when, number one, you don't have all the information. Number two, it does appear at times that, and it's not your fault, when you're presenting, you are tasked with a job, this is your department, and this is what you know. But we need more information to make educated decisions. And as we who live in the community or work in the community or have an interest in the community, to give valuable feedback, we really need to know the answers to these questions. So that therein lies the problem. But I will speak to the more acute question at issue, which is the specific location of this school. And basically, having been on these committees, that's what ends up happening. We've got a deadline, we've got to put in our feedback, we go running back and we say, okay, we do or do not like this location for these various reasons, having to do with traffic, having to do with overcrowding, having to do just stress on the transportation system, conflicting with residences, being too close to other schools. I mean, I think this location is terrible, by the way, for a school. It's just not right for it. But that's my own 2 cents on it. But
Right.
but the problem really is, this happens over and over and over again. So aside from the physicalities of the location, which I think are bad for various reasons that everyone's chimed in on, I also feel that, if we're going to the purpose of having a school here, because like you said, it may not end up being a high school, may end up being something else. And we've seen historically that's happened. There's been times when SEA has come to us and said, hey, we want this location. One of them was the old district office, which was a terrible location. It's on 86th Street and basically the off ramp of the BQE. And the community came forward and luckily SEA, took that input and moved on to a different site. But the problem, if we're looking to put a high school here and you come to us and say, hey, we're thinking about a high school, right? So we have to respond to that because it's all the information we've got. It will not, Fort Hamilton has been overcrowded for as long as I think any of us can remember. And for some reason, no one in all these years, this is from when before my son is going to be going to high school next year and the problem still hasn't been solved. I was hoping when he was born, maybe by the time he got to high school, the problem would be solved because I do live in the district, but it hasn't been. To me, come on, we're in New York City, right? We're capable of just about anything, right? Greatest city in the world. You can't solve this. I understand that the problem is convoluted, but come on, we got to figure out a better solution. And also the interchange of saying we need more seats in the district, and then we talk about the neighborhood. This neighborhood, very small area of the neighborhood within where all of these new schools are coming in and where this school is located is a very tight area. However, the district is much more widespread. And as Barbara pointed out, these kids are traveling in from everywhere, despite the fact that it's not, anyone can go anywhere. You don't just have a zone school. The priority is for zone. And most of these kids are coming in from the farther reaches of District 20, because I'll tell you, not many people choose to go to Fort Hamilton High School. Go talk to all the parents who are choosing schools. It's usually not their first choice. So I think SEA, if we're just talking about site location, should be looking so that the students aren't traveling so far. Let's get some schools in other parts of the district so that everyone can have a good zone school. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you,
or
Lori.
4 or 10.
I would just add that looking for school sites in other parts of the district was one of the comments that the CEC had at, that the needs are really at the other end of the district.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for, all the feedbacks and comments. As I said, and I just want to say it again, that all the concerns and questions you have are very important part of the process. But as mentioned, not all the answers comes from our part of the office, but I am happy to coordinate all, put together all of your questions and see who can best answer those questions and get back to you. We do have another engagement now, so I have to unfortunately leave, but my email address is there, so please share all your questions and concerns. I hear you when you say that many of your questions were repeated, but you didn't get answers, but I will try my best to share answers with the ones that we are able to find answers for you.
Shahrukh, do you have a moment for one more question? And then also, I don't see where you put your email in the, did you put it in the chat?
I did put it in the chat. Do you see it? It's on the chat.
I'm sure we can follow up with you, but if you would allow Jane Marie one last question, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I did also add in the chat the at high school, the admissions guide for New York City, because you can see that the high school admissions, it requires that you be a New York City resident and an 8th grader. So that's how wide the choices are. And that's DOE policy that I believe this is the 2nd year of it already. So this is the new guide in case anybody had admissions questions. The other thing is that we cannot also forget the fact, while the size of the high school seems very small on what they're building, we have to also remember that one of the things that they added in this proposal was about District 75 seats. And not every child has the ability to feel comfortable in an enormous public high school. So while there may certainly be a better location than the middle of Ovington, I understand that. We can't forget that we have to really advocate for seats for all of our children, including our special populations, and that sometimes a smaller high school or a choice of a smaller high school might be just what some families are looking for their child. So we need to really make sure that we're advocating for that, because we do have a rising special ed need here in District 20 from my understanding of the data. And I would also advocate that those children who have been through very small elementary schools and much smaller middle schools, the enormity of a place like Fort Hamilton might be too much. And we need to really also advocate for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane Marie. Thank you for staying for that question or comment.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to continue working with you all.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, bye.
Bye. Any final comments? We do still have to prepare a motion. So shall we move to that now?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone would like to suggest a motion?
Let me see if I can get this right.
Very
Sorry,
brave.
it'd be my first motion, so feel free to jump in. I propose to write a motion to address the concerns that the board have, or the joint committee have, pertaining to the site pre-selected for the high school. And then we should enumerate the issues that we have with the site. And ultimately, I guess it would be for the board to adopt the motion. Now, I will leave it at that. I don't know if someone wants to add to it or edit it or.
Okay.
I feel
Thank
like-
you, Luden. Dean?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think the motion that we're looking for is either to approve the site or disapprove it. I don't know, I may be, and then we could tack on anything we want, but basically we have to let them know, yes, we're in favor of the site, or no, we are not in favor of the site. So
Or
I think
yes,
that's the motion we need.
but yes, we're in favor, or I'm not, that's not the answer, but with conditions or no. When I spoke with Josephine earlier, are those the only two choices? Or are those our best choices?
Are we expecting another meeting, another committee? And I know I'm not on the committee, but are we expecting to meet with the other members of the DOE from the various departments before a
No.
motion?
No,
We don't have
That's not
time.
Don't have time.
we don't have
No.
time.
Do we have to make a motion tonight? Or
Yes.
can we wait for them to come back with some answers?
Well, unfortunately, the statutory clock is ticking and our next
Right.
board meeting is on Monday, the
Monday.
15th. So this
So,
is really,
yeah.
and we have meetings Wednesday and Thursday of this week. And it's a problem. It's a small window of time that we have to comment, and that comment is not flexible. That comment period is not flexible at all. So we do, and we have in the past, we have done different things. We have submitted, recommendations up or down. We have provided motions that outline a list of concerns, as Leo Dan just proposed. I think that our task is, according to statute, is to provide input that reflects the community impacts of this site. And I just want to mention to the committee members here that the follow-up steps of the process, we are not included as we are in any other. So if there's a zoning change that takes place here, it is done without community board input. If there is a state environmental review process, community boards are not part of that. I don't agree with that, but I think that is the rule. The Department of Education has that leeway in the zoning text as far as height, bulk, access. So this is really our only opportunity to comment as part of this.
Oh, wow.
process.
So if I could finish my thoughts. So what I would like to do, I'm going to express my opinion, and personally, I'd like to hear some other opinions, maybe before we make the motion, who's in favor, who's not. So I'm going to express my opinion, and then I'd like to hear other people, and then maybe we could see, what kind of motion we want to come up with. So as far as the site goes, no question that this is the most challenging site I think we've had to deal with when it comes to building a school. Just a little background information on myself. For those of you that don't know, I'm retired from NYPD as a captain. My last 5 years, I was in charge of school safety in Brooklyn North, which includes Brownsville, East New York, very challenging schools. And the reason I say that is this: many of the things that we brought up regarding transportation, how people walk back and forth, et cetera, we were able to address. So there are a lot of things we can address if it comes and when it comes to that. But there are a couple of things we can't address. One is the lack of information. We don't know what's going to go into this school. Are they going to have the labs? Are they going to have the science rooms? Are they going to have the shops like they do in larger schools? And if not, maybe every student doesn't want that. I don't know, but that's a factor. The biggest reason at this moment I cannot support this site is because we do not have not the slightest indication that those new seats would go to the overcrowding of the schools in this district. The high schools are open citywide. Jane Marie twice said that. Anybody in New York City will be able to come to this school. And I don't say that in this disparaging way, believe me. Listen, high school kids are high school kids. I almost remember when I was a high school kid. So, so it's not in a disparaging way. It's just that it will not address what we are trying to address. And I don't see how we can get around that. Nobody can give us even the slightest indication if there's any school in New York City or Brooklyn that was limited to a specific zoned area. So for those reasons, I at this point cannot support this site. And I hate to speak against it like that, but there's too much information that we do not have. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I agree. I was leaning toward it, but I just feel like there's too many unknowns.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. We'll go through the.
I agree with this. I just have
Hold on,
one other-
Carmela. I'm sorry. I still
Sure.
have hands up from other. If you would like to speak, then I just need you to have your hand up. Anne?
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with Dean, and I don't think there's anything about tweaking the design of the building or anything about the site or even staffing of traffic officers or whatever there is that's going to mitigate the situation. I think I would agree that we should vote against this site.
Thank you, Anne. Lori?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Anne. And I know that, you know, we've looked at a lot of these schools a lot of times, and Anne is wonderful at doing that. I agree with her that, you know, we are given a very narrow purview, and that was really to comment on the site location. However, as Josephine noted, after this, we don't get to say anything. So I would suggest, I mean, I would ask for a friendly amendment, maybe to, or maybe not friendly, but Leotin can let me know, based upon the intent of his motion, is that I would just tweak that maybe to say that, and from what I'm hearing from committee members, is that we vote to deny this and include a list of reasons why. Not only that go narrowly to the issue of the location of the school and the, all the reasons why that is not workable in our view. But then also we can add in, sort of these other comments that we still want to be heard on, even though it's may not be, they're telling us this isn't the time, but that we want to be heard on about the fact that, that Dean spoke to. Really, it's not going to solve the problem before us. So if Leotin would be amenable, I would ask that he agree to that friendly amendment, that the motion be tweaked to say that we deny the motion and give a list of reasons. I mean, deny the application and give a list of.
Thank you, Lori. Barbara?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with everything that's been said. If they were designating the new building as an annex to one of the existing high schools, then and building it to deal with overcrowding, that would be one thing, but they're not addressing overcrowding at all. They're just building another school. So from that perspective, I would also agree that we should vote against this.
Thank you. Steve, did you?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
No, we can't
No.
hear you.
Type
Okay,
it in.
I'll
Type
pop
it in
back
the message.
to
Type it in
Doris.
the chat. Yeah, Doris.
Doris.
I agree with everyone's comments, but I would like to say, as part of our motion, we should say we recognize the need for high school seats within Community Board 10 and School District 20. But this is the wrong site. But I think, I think we have to acknowledge the need and not just be no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Josephine, was there anyone else who?
Yeah, so I feel terrible because there were 2 members of the public who were in it, and we typically do open it up. There's one now with maybe if we could take a quick moment.
Yeah.
Paulette Healy's asking to speak until she has it.
Yeah.
So let me can we go to Victoria first?
Please do.
Victoria?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
I was just very happy to hear you go against the site because it sounded like everyone resigned to the fact that it was going to be a done deal. I was sort of losing my mind. I guess for me, I listened a lot to the neighbors who spoke the other day. I live around the corner, so it's not going to impact me the same way, but I work on the block. And you have to remember there are 3 schools and a half a block already on that block. And then PS 170 is down the block. They use that. People do drive up that way to go west. So I'm really happy, Josephine, that you put the map up with the numbers. The other thing I was just thinking is, it seems like DOE has a done deal. That's very troubling to me. And the fact that they didn't show up the other day was, I think, very troubling. I know Dean brought up a point. He was asking, why was there a need now when there wasn't a need before? They changed the law that was said to us where they have to reduce class size for high schools, and that's why it became an issue. It's for the whole city, but it seems to be impacting us. But right now, we have 2 of the high schools for all of District 20. That's 50% of the 4, right? If they put a 3rd one in, we now will have 60% of the high schools. I'm just saying, District 20 is very large, about 5 neighborhoods. We're only 20% of the district, and everything seems to be headed here. It's something just to think about. And the last thing I just want to say is, it's reminding me of the Shore Hill talk, where people don't want to have more construction, where they were promised there wouldn't be more construction, where they've been dealing with this very large building for a long time, but we're tipping the balance of the neighbors, and we have to consider that. This site, to me, is a site to reopen for senior housing. And when I mentioned that to Josephine, the first time I heard about it, she told me that the Bay Ridge Center had been talking to the Fifth Avenue Committee about doing that. I think that would be a much better use of the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
So I see in the chat, Paulette Healy has, Paulette,
Steve,
you have some information on numbers, on enrollment numbers?
Well, hi, thank you for letting me speak. And Jean Marie, thank you so much for elevating the need for our District 75 students, because they are part of our community. And we D75 parents have been fighting for not only a high school, but a middle school for 13 years. And it's stalled yet again.
Wow.
And we continue to send our District 75 students into other districts in order for them to continue their education, and it's just not fair. You know, it's kind of disingenuous for both the superintendent's office and Office of District Planning to say that, you know, there isn't a need for high school seats, when in their own district summaries, it details how District 20 and 22 are the only districts in Brooklyn that are over capacity in all of their high school seats. And that's not based off of the class size build. That's based off of their own utilization formula. So this back and forth is really ridiculous. You know, I'm a Bay Ridge resident, so I know this area very, very well. My son goes to telecommunications, and I was shocked to find out that they were thinking about converting St. Nicholas as a high school instead of the Santander site, because it really doesn't make sense. The Santander site there's already 4 elementary schools within a 1-block radius of each other where the Santander site is, and the lot is the same acreage as the St. Nicholas place. So the rationale is really, really frustrating. And, you know, when we are looking at, you know, high school admissions, yes, it's open, school-wide, citywide, anyone could apply anywhere. But as a parent who just went through the high school admissions process, they always tag a zone school with your application. So if for whatever reason your child doesn't get into any of the 12 programs that they have prioritized, you have a safety school. And Fort Hamilton is the safety school for a lot of our schools. So when we're having this conversation with the DOE, you know, they need to acknowledge that. They need to acknowledge that in the planning and in the processing, when it comes to admissions, this new school can be tagged and zoned for children coming out of IS 30, for children coming out of 170, for children coming out of the other schools escaping me right now, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, this, you know, this is all stuff that should be in this amendment that you guys are looking to write. And when it comes to, like, you know, how much of our kids are coming from, you know, other areas of the district, Yes, we have kids coming from Kensington to Fort Hamilton. We have kids coming from District 21 into, FDR, but they're still our kids. And, if we can just find a way to have an alternate site for the high school, that's needed like 10 years ago. And, so we definitely don't want to, cut off our nose to spite our face. We need the high school site. It just can't be it where they're proposing right now.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate your input. Steve, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
We
can.
can hear you.
Okay, I went out and came back in. I just wanted to echo what Victoria was talking about before. I happen to agree with her, and it's one of the points I was making, is that this is holding up that building there that could be used for other things, and people in that community really, they're kind of up in the air. We're being asked about siting here, okay? We're not being asked about commenting upon how we educate the children. That's something that's up to the Board of Education. And I don't think that we should be really going deeply into that. Doesn't mean we can't comment on it, but what you begin with in this, any kind of emotion you make here, is that we believe that the site itself is improper for this kind of a usage. All right, which we have talked about before. I mean, this is something that I do agree should be used for senior housing or something of that nature. And we can talk about the siting being that it's not well set up for children. Okay, that kind of a thing is, I think, will get us somewhere. Then maybe there should be a second part, and put it in two separate parts, about the problem we have that, you're going to put it in this community if you did pick this site. In other words, you shouldn't. But if you did pick it, we also disagree with it, because it is not going to be the reliever that we need for Fort Hamilton High School. It's too small. It's not located in the right place. Things of that nature. But keep away from the educational aspects of it, because that's not what we can comment on. And quite frankly, it's not something that they're going to consider with from us. Okay, I think that we have to say, make up your mind with respect to this particular building. We oppose it. We think that it's the wrong place for it. Okay, and but make up your mind. Okay, one way or the other. But I think that these are important facts. But you've got to divide it to two different things. One of them is the siting, and the second one is the education. Okay, and maybe there's a middle one too, if you really think about it, which is the zoning, okay, whether in fact it should be a zone school and things of that nature. But I definitely think you have to stick with the siting to begin with, because that's what we're being asked about.
Thank you, Steve. Dean?
Yes, I'd like to take a stab at a motion, and then we could chop it up and come up with a real motion. So my initial motion would be that Community Board 10 rejects the school construction authority proposal to build a school, a high school at the Ovington Avenue site. And we can put in the exact, addresses. And then we will add a whole list of all of the things that we've been talking about.
Okay, I'm glad that we have a motion to reject. In addition to what Steve suggested, I would enumerate all the issues, but should we also provide suggestions for other sites? I know the Santander site keeps coming up. Is it worth it to put that in there? No, you think it would dilute the?
That's their job. That's their
Okay.
job, not ours.
Okay, so we would leave it at that. No other suggestions for the site, just keep it
No,
concise.
this isn't up or down. Okay, we
Okay.
disagree with this site,
Got it.
and we can say
Okay.
why we disagree with it, but
Okay,
I think that you need to also incorporate what Doris said, that we do recognize the need for a
Need for
high school.
seats.
But community board, rejects
Yes.
this. site.
well,
This
you
side.
could start it. You could start it with some kind of an opening statement that, while recognizing the absolute need for this in Community Board 10, we reject this site because.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just chime in on that. I mean, it's nice to put that in there. I guess it's politic, but truthfully, they've told us over and over again in this presentation that, look, enrollment has nothing to do with it, anything like that. We're talking about a site location. So I feel that, you know, as Steve said, our strongest point, look, we have to address the question asked, and that is, what do you think about this site? And I think our strongest points should be, this is what we think about this site, and all the comments that everyone stated specifically about the site. I think that that's what they're looking for. And truthfully, look, if it turns out that the committee's vote is that we're all against it, and you don't want it there, for whatever your reason is, that I believe is what's going to be your best shot at getting that result.
Okay, thank you for that. Anne, you wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
and although we care for all the students citywide, we've learned that putting a school in our district does not answer our own overcrowding. So I think if we're going to say that we respond to the need for overcrowding, it's just a citywide kind of diffuse concern. It's not a local solution that we have here.
Okay, and Jane Marie.
Just once again, not only recognizing the need for seats, but recognizing the need for District 75 seats. And once again, to make sure that we are advocating for all of our students and families.
Okay. But for the simple motion, Steve, do you still have your hand up, or?
Nope,
Did you want to say
I'm
something
sorry.
else? Doris, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back at, sorry.
Hey, Doris, you said about 20 comments ago you weren't commenting anymore.
Yeah, you're out of comments.
Careful what you say, Doris.
One of the things we should consider is that they said that this could be an annex for another high school. If it's an annex, how do they get there? And what impact would that have on the block?
I just think it's improper. It's just too small.
Okay.
It doesn't work.
But that could be one of our comments. Or no, I
think we should just stick to the site, as Steve said before.
Okay.
Vote it down, let them, give all our reasons, and just support why we are not supporting, this site.
The site.
Yeah,
Okay.
and everything else, leave alone.
Okay.
Can we move the question?
We can, I'm going to repeat it back so it's clear that simply put, CB10, the motion would be CB10 rejects the SCA proposal to build the high school at the proposed site. I'll change the wording later. And then it would be followed with, I would enumerate the concerns and comments from the public while emphasizing that District 20 does have a need for high school seats, including District 75 seats.
Yeah.
Well, I could actually could be the preliminary statement.
Okay.
Right? Recognizing that we reject the site for the following reasons: it's too small. It is, it's in the middle of a street. It's only got one face. Those kind of things are what they're looking for right now.
Right.
The other stuff is going to be, to be perfectly frank, we could talk all day long. This isn't going to be built for 3 years, and in 3 years, if they decide they're going to use it, they say we need it for an annex. We're at it. There's not a thing we can do about that. To me, what we want to do is say we don't want it at this site because it's a bad site.
Exactly.
Right. So I just want to be clear, maybe the wording can come later, but I am going to, or we will include all of the comments and concerns, and we recognize that, or we reject, CB10 rejects the proposed site to build the high school.
I'd like to start on a positive note.
Okay,
that's recognizing the need. Okay. While recognizing the need for that, and that this need continues, we reject this site because.
Okay. While recognizing the need for seats in District 20 or high school seats, we reject, the Community Board 10 rejects the SCA proposal to build a high school at the site because,
Correct.
And then the whole litany.
Right, and District 75.
And
Yeah.
well,
But the litany
Yes.
being but the litany being limited to the specifically to the geography. Okay, of the site and the problem, and the fact that it's in the middle of a street, the fact that there's neighbors that live on, directly across the street when they were used to something else, that it's more appropriately, we believe would be more appropriate to senior living, something of that nature. I don't think that we should get it. I mean, we all recognize that that we need more. You can put something in secondarily and say, we also want to make a comment after the primary motion, and just saying as a comment, we believe that that this would not serve the absolute needs of the extraordinary overcrowding in this district. Okay, because it would be open to everybody under these circumstances. But I don't know if that's a good thing to put in there.
Yeah, I don't think we should. We
I
sound
keep it, I
like
keep that.
don't want
just-
other people coming into the community. I think we
That's
should just
right, but
stick to
it's
the
not that.
facts. We don't need, we don't need a 3-page letter. Let's stick to a few facts supporting
Yeah,
why we don't
okay,
support it.
okay, I agree
simple.
with you, Dean. That's where I
Yeah,
was
keep
going,
it
but I'm.
simple.
CB10 recognizes the need for additional seats for high school students and D75 high school students.
Correct.
We are concerned that this particular site creates more issues than problems that it solves. It creates transportation problems. It's a narrow street that's already very congested. It would share a subway station with another local high school. It potentially exposes
Bingo.
elementary students to a lot of high school students without a lot of management of that. We support the effort. We do not support the site.
That would be in
I
there
love it.
as soon
I
as we
love it.
state, as long as we state up front that we reject it after we have
Yes.
recognizing. Okay.
Yeah.
Lori, did you want to add something?
Yes, just, oops. Yes, just on adding to that list of comments, I would ask that, and again, sticking to addressing the site location, which is what we're tasked with commenting on. Josephine really did bring up a very good point, which I would ask to be added to this list, which is that it being on a residential block, if, once that site is approved, they can change the zoning and the density of that building can be really substantial. And with, it being a residential block, in addition to its proximity to all these other schools, would just be not only, out of the character of the neighborhood, but also, add to all the other problems that you have with the crowding, with the transportation, with the traffic congestion, noise, et cetera, et cetera.
And you suggest it would go in the primary portion of the motion?
No, I mean, you make your opening statement. I mean,
Okay.
if we're drafting, as Steve said, and as Terry put in, and some others. But when we're getting to that actual list with regard to specifics about the site, why the site wouldn't be good, one of the considerations is the existing zoning could be impacted on that lot, and it could, be a very oversized building for the block.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then finally, Anne,
Yeah, I just want to make a little comment about the first phrase. I don't think we should say, understanding that there's a shortage of seats in District 20, because that would imply that this project at this site would alleviate the crowding in District 20.
Right.
When it's a citywide situation, so.
Good point.
Okay.
So
I think we can add that there's no evidence that this building will alleviate the current overcrowding problem
Right,
that we
that's-
have in District 20.
yes, and that can be in the body where we enumerate the
Yeah.
concerns, and that's probably the crux of it, because that's what they came to us with, that this is being built to alleviate overcrowding, and there's no evidence of that.
Yeah, but they said
No.
overcrowd, no,
We
wait,
need-
they said overcrowding. They didn't say overcrowding in the district.
Well, actually, when I asked that question directly of Steve Gonzalez the other night, and he said, yes, that it was
Okay,
overcrowding in
good.
District 20. So, I
Good.
mean, I could go back and review, but
Well,
No,
they
Steph,
keep
that's great.
bringing up Fort
Okay.
Hamilton. They
That's
keep
what he
bringing
said.
up
Yes,
Fort Hamilton.
yes, it's
So-
repeatedly alleviate crowding at the local high
I-
schools, District 20, Fort Hamilton, and telecommunications.
I just think it's
Well-
important to include that we know we need D75 seats.
Yes.
Yes. But
Well,
I
that's what we
can't-
were gonna put at the beginning, right?
Yeah, because they
Yes.
haven't
we just
figured that
agreed
out at
not to
all.
put that at the beginning. I thought we recognize, we recognize the need for seats. I thought we agreed that it was best not to put that and go straight with we
We
reject.
recognize the need for seats for high school students and D75 high school students. We've seen no evidence that this new building would alleviate that problem.
That gets
No.
very pretty. I'd like to go with
Now,
the,
now we're getting further away. Now, I don't
It's
agree with that.
circular, it's a
Yeah,
little
I
circular.
kind of think we're getting in the weeds here.
so that
I
could
like
be,
the simple no.
Go back
Keep
to
it
the simple
simple.
one.
I'd like it-
location.
I'm game for whatever you guys come up with.
a simple rejection
Yeah.
with
Can
all.
we leave the list to Stephanie and Josephine to come up with? Josephine's come up with many lists, many times in the past. She knows what we need. She's been here, and they'll come up with the good list. We don't have to micromanage.
She takes
I assure
awesome
you, I will
notes.
be working
Right.
with Josephine.
Right,
Do
we
we
have,
need a-
no,
do we
right.
need a se-
We will,
Stephanie,
we
do
will
we need a-
compile the notes.
God.
Yeah, we compile
Stephanie,
the
do we
notes,
need
but
a second to the
again, it's about this
The
is about
site.
the location, the site.
Got it.
And
The
it's gotta
site.
be about the site.
Got
Okay.
it. Okay.
Do we
So
have
simple
Stephanie?
motion, although,
And the safety of the students.
well, that
That's
speaks
part
to
of
the
the-
site
Oh, yeah.
location.
Yes.
Right.
I move to call the
because I
question.
think
Okay, the motion is on the floor. Community Board 10 rejects the School Construction Authority's proposal to build a 676 seat high school at the proposed site, the Ovington Avenue site.
Perfect. Add a list of things that you
And
guys
then
decide.
We'll
Do we
enumerate the
need-
issues, being very clear, and I can go back and review them, what you would like in the comments. And to clarify, if you are voting in favor, you are voting to reject the proposal. Okay.
Stephanie, do we need a second to the motion?
We need a
Yes, we
second.
do.
I'll second.
I'll second it. Oh, go ahead. You
Okay,
beat me
lots
to
of
it.
seconds. All right, so now we can vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay.
Any
Josephine, do you have
opposed?
that? Okay, any
Yes.
opposed?
No opposed? Any abstentions or recusals?
I believe I
Okay,
have
just
to
have a
recuse.
okay, point of order.
Yeah.
Jane,
order.
you're not on the committee, so you don't
Right,
vote.
right.
Point
Exactly.
of order.
Point of
Thank
order?
you.
Yes,
Steve Harrison.
Right. How do we, I mean, who's going, are we letting Josephine write this now? Actually
no,
write the,
Stephanie will write it and I will, we will review it together. Do you want us to send it out to you in
Send it out.
advance?
I think it would, I would like to see it
Yes,
before Monday.
Okay.
Okay,
We
for
can
no
do
other
that.
reason that if there's some glaring error, everybody should have an opportunity to
course.
look at it. I'm not, but I mean,
Got it.
generally speaking, I trust you guys 100%.
Okay,
But I
very
do-
good.
thank you for the endorsement.
Generally, that's
Vote of-
generally.
100%,
Vote of
but you want to
confidence,
see
I'll
it
take
first.
it.
This is not
Stephanie,
Josephine's
get
first
ready for round
rodeo.
3.
I've been working with Josephine. It'll be good.
We
Thank you
trust
very
guys
much. So do we
98%.
have a
Meeting,
motion to
Stephanie.
adjourn?
Motion.
Thank
to
you,
adjourn.
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Second.